Hi, it's Katrina. There is a theory that there have been civilizations before us and there will be civilizations after us. Were humans really first? Where did we come from? How did we start? Strap in because today we've got pre-flood civilizations, human-like dinosaurs, and alien beings. Hope you're ready for it. The Silurian Hypothesis. Somewhere in Earth's deep, shadowy past, back when the continents were joined together and trees were the new kids on the block, the planet may have hosted an industrial civilization, as in a fully functional civilization on Earth before dinosaurs even evolved. No, this isn't a lost episode of Ancient Aliens. This is real science. Weird, speculative, and slightly unsettling science, but science nonetheless. The idea has a name that sounds like a punk rock album, the Silurian Hypothesis. It asks a wild but oddly reasonable question. Could an advanced industrial civilization have existed on Earth millions of years ago? And if so, would we be able to find evidence of it today? It's named after the Silurian period, a distant geological time, as a catchy way to emphasize the vastness of geological time and the potential for past civilizations to have vanished without leaving easily detectable traces. The hypothesis explores what kind of evidence, if any, might survive millions of years. The answer will surprise you more than you think. Astrophysicist Adam Frank, PhD, was out and about one day thinking about aliens and climate change when he dropped by NASA's Goddard Institute for Space Studies to have a little chat. He brought up the idea of alien civilizations nuking their own climate with his scientist pal, Gavin Schmidt, also PhD. Together, they contemplated Adam's idea, and suddenly, the Silurian Hypothesis was born. This isn't a conspiracy theory, it's real scientists trying to find the truth behind the origins of life on this planet, and they went full Sherlock Holmes on gallons of espresso. The first thing to figure out was where the evidence might be. Let's say some ancient civilization of reptilian humanoids lit up the planet with factories and fossil fuels 100 million years ago. Where are the ruins of their factories? I know you might think they should be easy to find, maybe buried a few feet under the soil or something, but surely not destroyed. As it turns out, even a civilization like ours could be easily erased by the planet's natural forces. Kind of humbling, actually. According to Dr. Frank, entire cities, nuclear factories, and even old Google servers would all be long gone after 100 million years. Pulverized, vaporized, ghosted by time. Even steel would be crushed by the Earth's tectonic forces and changes. Don't forget that entire continents rise and fall all the time. There are entire sunken continents that don't just sink, but get eaten by the Earth. Skyscrapers cannot stand up to Mother Nature. That being said, there should still be traces of an industrial civilization. Tiny chemical fingerprints always survive the test of time. Weird carbon and oxygen ratios, maybe a sprinkle of plastic dust or some rogue nanoparticles. Scientists should have found something unnatural by now to point at a Mesozoic industrial society. Now, how much do you know about the Paleocene-Eocene thermal maximum? If you're a normal person, probably not much. This was a super warm period 56 million years ago when Earth turned into a global spa. There was no ice. Palms were growing near the poles. Ocean temps were so high they would cook your average salmon. Frank and Schmidt took a close look at this epoch's chemical traces. They found some spikes in carbon levels, but they didn't quite scream prehistoric smog crisis. There were changes in carbon levels that could hint at a sudden industrial complex. However, they seemed to have accumulated over many hundreds of thousands of years, slow enough to suggest that nature did it, not a bunch of prehistoric beings with coal-powered hoverboards. But wait a second. Why are we assuming this ancient civilization poisoned the atmosphere and unleashed a carbon hellscape like humans are doing right now? I mean, it's not that far off. We are actually considering nuking Mars or another planet to kickstart changes in the atmosphere. But on the other hand, what if they were smarter than us? Let's say this ancient civilization was real and smart, like really smart. Solar-powered, tofu-eating, oat milk latte, sustainable energy smart. They wouldn't have left a mess. And the less mess you leave behind, the harder it is for nosy future species to know you were ever here. It's like going through someone's browser history only to find they always use incognito mode. Great for them, bad for science. Frank and Schmidt say the evidence isn't there to say for certain that an ancient race lived free on Earth before us, but they also admit that science just doesn't have the tools or the methods needed to find out for sure. It's like trying to find a needle in a haystack using a microscope while blindfolded. What do you think of the Silurian Hypothesis? And if there were a civilization 100 million years ago, what do you think they looked like? Plato's shocking truths about Atlantis. At the bottom of the Aegean Sea, under 400 feet of salty denial, might lie the OG of all lost civilizations. The one, the only Atlantis. Not a theme park, not a Nickelodeon movie, the real deal. According to new research, Plato might have been onto something more than just a metaphor for ancient Greek morality. When Christos Jonis, archaeologist extraordinaire, dug into the myths with a bit of science, some hard math, and satellite imaging, things started looking suspiciously real. Here's the raw deal. Almost no mainstream scientists believe in Atlantis. Critics say the whole story was invented by Plato as some ancient fan fiction. He made it all up to preach about virtue and hubris. But what if he didn't? What if Plato was just doing what Homer did with Troy, telling a story so juicy and so dang epic that people forgot it was history and came to think of it as legend? To find out the truth, let's start with a where. Most Atlantis hunters have been eyeballing Santorini as the real location of the lost city. Santorini is more than just the poster child of Mediterranean sunsets and overpriced resorts. It's an island that was home to a civilization that flourished 3,600 years ago. But like the fabled Atlantis, this culture met a devastating end. The issue is the timeline. Plato said 9,600 BC for Atlantis' destruction, but Santorini's big eruption was in 1600 BC. The dating doesn't line up. Also, Plato mentioned that Atlantis' main island was about the size of Crete, with the main city about 4 miles away, surrounded by water rings and canals like some kind of ancient Venetian fever dream. Nothing of the sort has been found near Santorini, not even at the bottom of the sea. Jonas and his oceanographer friends, armed with data from coastal and marine geospatial technologies, turned their attention to the Cyclades Islands. They found something amazing. Many thousands of years ago, the Cyclades Islands were the mountaintops of a massive super island, one connected by the Cyclades Plateau. And guess where this super island is today? Yep, submerged under 400 feet of ocean. This is the perfect spot for Atlantis, matching Plato's description with eerie accuracy. And you know what else Jonas and his team found? Sea levels rose approximately 400 feet after the last big ice age meltdown. This is starting to look like a perfect match. You can't get this good of a match even if you pay for Tinder Premium. This island was big, Crete-sized big, and it was right next door to Santorini, just like Plato described. An island within an island, a geographer's version of a turducken. The conclusion here is that Plato's timeline weirdly matches real geologic chaos. Between 10,000 and 8,000 BC, glaciers melted and sea levels rose. Earthquakes and floods ravaged coastlines, and Atlantis, if it was real, went from beach destination to submarine hangout in no time. But there's still one huge question left to answer, and that is, where did the people of Atlantis come from? If this was an advanced civilization 12,000 years ago, were there others in different parts of the globe? Were they 100% human? Could they live for hundreds of years like the patriarchs of the Bible? These are questions I can't answer, but I will say that experts have a guess for what became of the Atlanteans. It's believed that after the flooding, some people made it to the island of Crete and eventually founded what we now call the Minoan civilization. Other survivors fled to the Peloponnese, kicking off what would become the Mycenaean civilization, Homer's favorite tough guys. The leftovers stuck around on the mountaintops of the Sunken super island, becoming the Aegean civilization. In other words, Atlantis' survivors formed 3 separate ancient Greek cultures. Talk about resilience. But then who formed the cultures in India, Mesopotamia, and Egypt? There are so many more mysteries left to solve when it comes to humanity's beginnings. And now for a quick break because it's shoutout time. I want to give a big thank you to Big Doug and Jim B for supporting this channel. We wouldn't be here without you guys. Be sure to subscribe if you haven't already to join the Origins Explained family. Fossils of the pre-flood world. If there was a civilization on Earth before the Great Flood, during the days of Atlantis and reptilian overlords and the Garden of Eden, where are all their fossils? No mass graves, no skeleton-studded cliffs, not even a fossilized pinky toe. This biblical cold case comes with geological chaos, murder rates that make Grand Theft Auto look tame, and a few random artifacts that might change your life. Let's start with human beings. We as a species don't fossilize easily. Humans are soft, we rot fast, and unless we die in just the right way under a mudslide or a blanket of volcanic ash, our bones don't hang around like dinosaur femurs. Land animals in general have a low fossilization rate, which is ironic considering museums are filled with them. The human fossil record is remarkably fragile. Often our knowledge of entire ancestral species hinges on the discovery of a single bone fragment, a lone toe or a scrap of jaw, the only remnants to survive. Keep this in mind as we explore further. Now let's talk flood. If Noah's flood really happened as described, it was less of a gentle rising of the water like your slowly filling bathtub, and more like a planet-wide blender was switched on. Picture whole continents getting sucker punched by underwater mud flows and high-velocity runoff. Human bones wouldn't fossilize, they'd be powdered like chalk in a tumble dryer. Anything caught in the flood would have been turned into dust. Even when something mysterious is found, there's the issue of investigator bias. So let's say a perfectly preserved human foot bone is discovered in a 3-million-year-old strata. You might say, aha, proof of a flood victim. But scientists often perform mental gymnastics worthy of the Olympics. They'll look at that foot bone and say, this must have belonged to an ape with extremely human feet. See what I mean? When your worldview says humans didn't exist yet, the evidence gets rebranded. Even if pre-flood bones did turn up, there is a real risk they'd be cataloged under miscellaneous primate and filed away next to Bigfoot hair samples. Let's look at some other evidence people like to point out. I don't think we should gloss over one of Genesis's most metal details. It says, the earth was filled with violence. Not just a few bad apples, the whole orchard had turned homicidal. What do you suppose happens when you mix widespread violence with low-tech civilization? Population collapse. There is plenty of proof of civilizations collapsing all on their own. For example, the Waorani people of Ecuador, known for their legendary kill rates, were nearly wiped out by intertribal warfare until missionaries brought some peace to their tribes. Their numbers dropped to about 500 before rebounding with less stabbing. People really can wipe themselves out, even without nukes. The point is that if the pre-flood world was a murder fest with homicide as a lifestyle, there was probably a dwindling population by the time the flood hit. Fewer people means fewer fossils, especially when these few were turned into soup by a global cataclysm. The sad reality is that even if Earth was churning up the jams 12,000 or 24,000 years ago, the fossils of our prehistoric party animal cousins just don't exist. The pre-civilization kings of Sumer. Somewhere in the dusty libraries of ancient Mesopotamia, scratched into clay by guys who had zero idea how famous they'd become, are records of kings who ruled before the Great Flood. These are the kings who ruled the planet before humanity crawled out of its cave. But if they weren't ruling men and women, then who? Welcome to the most controversial clay document ever etched. It's called the Sumerian King List. Written in cuneiform script are the names of 10 antediluvian kings who ruled the first cities in the world, like Eridu, Bad Tabira, and Shuruppak in Mesopotamia. Get ready to wrangle your eyebrows, because the reigns of these kings are impossible. The list claims they ruled over their respective cities for tens or even hundreds of thousands of years. The list has kings going all the way back to 20,580 BC for the first dynasty of Kish, and they go back even further. A list of 8 kings goes back over 240,000 years before the flood. Some kings ruled over a humanless Earth because the Homo sapiens didn't even exist back then. It's as if aliens came from space, ruled over monkeys for 400,000 years, and then in 20,000 BC started ruling over a new human kingdom. That might be reasonable. There is plenty of evidence of human civilization already being advanced 12,000 years ago. Just look at Göbekli Tepe in Turkey. Who's to say humans weren't ruled by alien gods for 8,000 years before that? At least that's what they say on Ancient Aliens, right? There is more evidence outside of this mysterious list. Archaeologists noticed something odd while mapping the ancient cities of Mesopotamia. They are all aligned, but not just to stars or cardinal directions. Some structures in ancient Sumerian cities are oriented toward where the North Pole used to be. 7 cities are linked to these mythical antediluvian kings, and each one has a layout or a grand ruin that is pointing not to modern north, but to where the North Pole used to be. The cities of Eridu, Babylon, Bad Tibira, Larak, Larsa, Sippar, and Shuruppak were all aligned with where the North Pole was about 20,000 years ago. That was right at the beginning of the first dynasty of Kish, as the Sumerian king list tells us. Is any of this evidence that aliens ruled the world for 500,000 years, then peaced out when humans started building cities? Or is that just a crazy theory? The Enemies of Cain. The Bible, either the world's first history book or the greatest fable ever told, or a combination, and its ancient pages might be a hint that prior to Adam, before Eve, even before Adam divorced Lilith, there was a mysterious group of beings on Earth. Listen closely, because even if you don't believe in the Bible, you're going to want to hear this story. You already know the story of Cain. It's as old as time. Cain kills his brother, gets cursed by God, and must go off on his own. But if you read between the lines, you'll find a whole different tale. Cain has just committed the first recorded murder. He gets exiled from the presence of God and is sent to wander east of Eden, to a strange place called the Land of Nod. But instead of living under a rock and eating moss forever, Cain thrives. He finds himself a wife, has a kid, and builds a city. Remember now that Cain is Adam's son. The Bible tells us that Adam was the first man ever and that he had 2 sons with Eve. So 4 people on Earth total, all closely related. Then who did Cain hook up with? Genesis tells us that even before Cain is booted from Eden, he's worried. Cain explicitly says that he's afraid of being killed once he leaves the safety of paradise. Not by a rogue bear or a mammoth, but by people. Cain was leaving Eden and moving into someone else's territory. But whose? Who was out there? This is where things get crazy. Don't hyperventilate yet, but just in a fun, biblical, sci-fi twist, what if Cain was sent into the domain of the Anunnaki? You know, the godlike beings from Sumerian mythology who came from the stars, dabbled in DNA, and helped jumpstart human civilization. The Anunnaki were the ones on the Sumerian king list 400,000 years ago. And their descendants, part human in blood, were the rulers of Mesopotamia 20,000 years ago, whenever Cain fled Eden. In other words, Cain may have walked into alien territory. No wonder he was scared to leave Eden. Suddenly, his story makes more sense. The fear, the wife, the great unknown. Cain might have stumbled into a technologically advanced culture that was already thriving east of Eden. The Anunnaki could have taken him in. Curious little earthling that he was, taught him their ways, and even introduced him to some alien babes. Could the greatest secret in human history really be hiding in plain sight in the tale of Cain and Abel? The city that shouldn't exist. A staggering 60 feet of mud once entombed this place, a testament to a catastrophe so violent it seemingly strong-armed Lake Titicaca nearly 20 miles from its original shores. Today, at an altitude of 13,000 feet, colossal megaliths still stand, their surfaces bearing carvings of such exquisite precision that a Swiss watch would pale in comparison. But archaeologists still argue over whether this place was built by primitive pre-Inca villagers with nothing but llamas and hope, or advanced extraterrestrials. The debate has raged for years, and the people are still undecided. Welcome to Tiwanaku, possibly the oldest city in the world, possibly antediluvian, and possibly dropped onto Earth by a race of advanced entities who didn't care much for physics. You'll find Tiwanaku near the southeastern shore of Lake Titicaca in Bolivia. Or rather, you'll find the ruins of Tiwanaku, all that's left after the city got slapped by a cosmic-level disaster and buried in enough dirt to start its own continent. The structures that survived are already jaw-dropping. You've probably heard of a few of them, like Pumapunku, built with precision-cut stones that fit together like Lego from space. or the Kalasasaya Temple, home to the famous Gate of the Sun, or the Akapana Pyramid, which was once mistaken for a hill because it was so overgrown. So who built all of these marvels? That's the thing. Nobody knows. By the time the Inca showed up a little over 500 years ago, Tiwanaku was already ancient and in ruins. It was as much of a mysterious legend to the Inca as it is to us today. They couldn't explain who built it either. Spanish conquistador Pedro Cieza de León rolled through in 1549 and basically said, "Yeah, we have no clue how this was built," and the locals laughed at me when I asked if it was Inca. Let's phone a friend for the rest of this mystery. Meet Arthur Poznański, the Indiana Jones of Tiwanaku. He spent 40 years studying the site. That's longer than most marriages. The man noticed that pillars and portals at the Kalasasaya temple functioned as a massive sundial, calibrated to align with the solstices and equinoxes. But wait a second, there's a dating discrepancy. The huge sundial only works with the solstices 17,000 years ago. It doesn't match with modern celestial events. Let that sink in for a minute. A megalithic solar calendar engineered by someone or something who apparently had advanced astronomy before the Ice Age was over. Poznański's calculations were later confirmed by Rolf Mueller at the Potsdam Observatory using modern tools. So unless ancient Bolivians invented lasers and forgot to tell us, something advanced was going on. And there's more, just in case your mind wasn't already blown to smithereens. In 2020, the Bolivian National Institute of Archaeology announced they had discovered the remains of 5 separate cities beneath Tiwanaku, some buried more than 60 feet deep. If this is true, it means Tiwanaku isn't a single city. It's a stack of civilizations layered like a cosmic lasagna, with the bottom layer possibly dating back to 17,000 BC. That's way older than Stonehenge, and even older than Göbekli Tepe. Even older than agriculture, and definitely older than whatever polite mainstream archaeology is comfortable admitting. Stone Age Siberia. This will change history as we know it. The world's oldest fortresses have been found in the midst of the Russian wilderness like someone's version of Neolithic Fortnite. These shocking finds are changing the whole history of hunter-gatherers. 8,000 years ago, some Siberian hunter-gatherers had a big brain idea. They didn't quite understand agriculture yet, but they did develop a knack for building things. They started setting up fortresses, crafting elaborate pottery, and fishing in abundance. This is Amnia, where Stone Age life was less about simplicity and more about defense and strategy. Perched high on a scenic bluff overlooking the Amnia River in the remote Lower Ob region of Siberia lies what might just be the world's oldest known fortress. Archaeologists uncovered 10 sunken house pits, some earthen walls, and wooden palisades built with enough intent and architectural savvy to make you wonder, what were these people guarding against? Raiders or rabid elk? Discovered by a team led by Professor Henny Piazonka from the University of Berlin and detailed in the journal Antiquity, this site is ancient. According to radiocarbon dating, the Amnia site predates any known hilltop defenses across Eurasia, making it the northernmost and oldest of its kind. Tanja Schreiber, co-author and archaeologist from Berlin's Institute of Prehistoric Archaeology, said this discovery redefines what experts thought was possible for hunter-gatherers. They had clearly built the fortress to protect themselves from other human beings, which means there was intense conflict going on when woolly mammoths hadn't fully bit the dust yet. What were they protecting themselves from? Archaeologists have a few theories. People may have been trying to control the fish in the river, hoarding them all for themselves, or they may have simply been trying to control their territory. What's so amazing about this is that for decades, researchers clung to the idea that violence and territorial conflict didn't show up in human society until after farming. You know, once people had land, crops, and barns full of angry goats to protect. But Amnia throws a spiked bone club right through that narrative. The idea that hunter-gatherer societies were peaceful, hippie collectives just got bulldozed by walls and ditches. These people were competitive, calculated, and maybe even a little bit paranoid. The secret Amazonian pyramid. Tucked in the heart of the Amazon rainforest, Cerro El Cono rises like something out of myth. It's an unusually perfect pyramid-shaped peak standing guard in the Sierra del Divisor. also known as the Watershed Mountains. Although it looks like a mountain, it might really be an overgrown pyramid more than 10,000 years old. This region of the Amazon jungle is bursting with biodiversity. It's home to some of the world's last uncontacted indigenous tribes who say Cerro El Cono is sacred to them. They see it not as just a mountain, but as an apu, a mountain spirit revered in ancient Andean tradition across Peru, Ecuador, and Bolivia. Long before Europeans arrived, the Inca honored apus as protectors, living entities with human traits capable of safeguarding entire civilizations. That reverence still echoes here deep in the jungle. Then there's the shape to consider. I know mountains and pyramids all have a similar triangle shape, but sometimes the coincidence is too much to ignore. Cerro El Cono doesn't look like a natural mountain. Its sharply defined pyramid form stands out against the undulating landscape like a monument left by something long forgotten. It's eerily symmetrical, almost too precise for nature's usual chaos. Could this be a sacred site built by a lost civilization? It wouldn't be the first time. Positioned near the city of Pucallpa and sitting right beside the river, a vital artery feeding the Amazon, Cerro El Cono is strategically placed. If you were going to build a megalithic city in the Amazon, this is where you would do it. The fact that there isn't another mountain, not even a bunny hill for as far as the eye can see, is also suspicious. So, is it just a mountain? Or are you looking at the moss-draped remains of an ancient buried world hidden in plain sight? I'm having serious Bosnian pyramid flashbacks here. If you don't know about the Bosnian pyramid, oh boy, you need more origins explained in your life. Our alien creators are watching us. The Bible tells us that man came from the clay of the earth. But what if humanity originated much farther than the soil? What if humans are from Mars? While most of us are still trying to keep our houseplants alive and figure out what day it is, others, like UFO researcher Scott Waring, have been busy combing through images from NASA's Curiosity rover, zooming in on rocks that might not be rocks at all. What Scott has found is nothing short of revolutionary. He says, I was going through some Mars photos and I found a structure with walls, evenly thick, connected walls that form multiple rooms. He's not talking about a few suggestively shaped boulders. Scott is talking about architectural ruins, layout, design, something that looks built, not eroded. And it's on the surface of Mars. Somehow, this patch of the Martian surface appears to feature walls with symmetrical geometry, uniform thickness, and internal divisions. Waring said that doesn't happen in nature. This is deliberate. This is intelligent construction, just on a smaller scale than we're used to. In photos, the ruins look enormous, but in reality, they are shockingly small. A while back, Waring also reported discovering what looked like a 6-inch tall humanoid figure, now affectionately known as the Mars Woman statue. Naturally, skeptics waved it off as total hogwash, but Waring is sticking to his theory, saying that whoever built the statue was also tiny, only a couple inches tall. The ruins photographed by the NASA rover are also small, big enough to be lived in by ants and cockroaches. It turns out Martians might not be 8-foot-tall grays with psychic powers. They might be super tiny humanoid beings like that alien in the head of that dude from the Men in Black movie. You know the one I mean. As usual, NASA has offered its standard response, pareidolia. That's the fancy psychology term for when your brain sees familiar patterns and random shapes, like seeing animals in clouds or the time your toast looked like Elvis. Except here's the thing. These weird Martian structures apparently keep showing up. Pyramids, monoliths, strange doors carved into cliff faces, and now walled ruins with runes and consistent measurements. Waring is famous for finding all kinds of objects in satellite photos. I'm surprised that these structures are so tiny, but hey, what do you think? Life on Mars, living in tiny homes? What about the sculptures and the larger structures? Let me know your thoughts. More evidence of sunken societies. Deep beneath the Baltic Sea, where it's cold, dark, and filled with secrets, scientists have just stumbled onto something wild. Lurking 69 feet below the surface in Germany's Bay of Mecklenburg, researchers uncovered what might be the oldest DIY project in human history. It's a giant Stone Age megastructure dubbed the Blinker Wall. And no, that's not the name of a German techno DJ, though it should be. This thing is massive, nearly a mile long. It's made of over 1,600 stones, laid out neatly side by side like your neighbor's annoyingly perfect garden path. except this one is 10,000 years old or more, and underwater. In comes the controversy. There are two main theories to explain this baffling construct. Either it's a wall from a civilization that was swallowed by the sea who knows how many centuries ago, or it's an ancient trap used to catch wild animals by prehistoric people with a hunger for deer meat. The brains behind the discovery are fans of the latter theory. Dr. Jacob Gearson and his team at Keele University used high-resolution hydroacoustic imaging, an autonomous underwater vehicle, aka a robot with scuba certification, and actual divers to map out the full extent of the structure. They think it was built to herd animals. Long before Uber Eats or even spears with decent aim, these early hunter-gatherers used mega stone funnels to guide reindeer and bison into kill zones. According to the study, this could be one of the oldest documented man-made hunting structures on Earth. All the same, these researchers are still only guessing. They weren't there. They don't know what the wall was used for. Others believe it has nothing to do with hunting and was a protective wall for a lost city. The only thing everyone does agree on is that it is not natural. The stones are each less than a foot high and a foot wide, and they are laid out way too neatly to be a natural formation. As for why it's underwater, the Blinker Wall was built before rising sea levels swallowed it up around 8,500 years ago. Climate change has been ruining real estate since before history class was invented. So, evidence of pre-human civilization or clever hunters? At the very least, this sunken wall shows that our ancestors weren't just hairy lunatics chucking spears and grunting at clouds. They were organized, strategic, and collaborative. You try getting a group of Stone Age humans to agree on where to put over 1,000 rocks. That's ancient project management at its finest. Thanks for watching. Which of these awesome finds did you like the most? Let me know what you think about pre-human civilizations in the comments.
Be sure to stay tuned for extra content you might have missed. Ancient Babylon. Ancient Babylon was one of the most influential cities in Mesopotamia. This incredible place was the focal point of art, culture, and civilized society for 2,000 years. It was founded prior to 2000 BC on the edge of the Euphrates River, 60 miles from modern Baghdad in what is now Iraq. It was in the city of Babylon that a sophisticated system of law was formed and the first universal language was created. While there may have been other languages outside Babylon, Babylonian was learned all across the Middle East so that people could communicate across borders. It was an international language that helped facilitate trade and cross-kingdom cooperation. Babylon is most famous today for two of its most legendary features. First, the Hanging Gardens of Babylon. If the stories are true, this ancient wonder was built by biblical king Nebuchadnezzar II to appease his wife. It was supposedly the most spectacular artificial garden in the world. The city was also home to the biblical Tower of Babel, which most archaeologists agree was in fact the ziggurat known as the Etemenanki. In ancient Sumerian, that means temple foundation of heaven and earth. Babylon truly was the center of civilized society up until about 1200 BC. That was when things got rocky, as they went to war with neighboring city-states like Assyria and Elam. Babylon was responsible for two brutal attacks on Jerusalem in the 6th century BC. The Babylonians even destroyed the first temple and allegedly stole the Ark of the Covenant. Their supremacy over the ancient world would finally come to an end when Alexander the Great captured the city in 331 BC. The city of Erbil. Erbil in Iraq is currently home to about 1.5 million people. But while this city has all the modern amenities you would expect, it is in fact very ancient. It's one of the oldest continuously inhabited cities in the world, with its origins going back 8,000 years. The oldest part of the city is the ancient citadel at its center. At the very core of Erbil is a distinctly oval-shaped block of structures built over a raised earthen mound. The mound is at least 6,000 years old, yet the buildings on top of it come from the 19th and 20th centuries. The modern structures have prevented archaeologists from digging down to the layers of the ancient city. Because of this, all we really know about Erbil comes from ancient accounts. John McGuinness, an archaeologist with the University of Cambridge, says the existence of the city was little more than a hypothesis for years. Because there were no excavations, there was no way to officially declare an ancient city buried underneath the new one. But all of that has finally changed. For the first time in history, researchers just completed major excavations at the northern edge of the mound. They used ground-penetrating radar to identify a pair of huge stone structures underneath the center of the citadel. It's believed these structures might be the ruins of the original temples built at the city's core 2,500 years ago. One of them could be the Temple of Ishtar, dedicated to the Assyrian goddess of love and war. Unfortunately, we'll have to wait a while for new excavations to reveal more secrets. But we still have the historical accounts to tell us the story of Erbil. It was the home of Assyrian kings up until Alexander the Great conquered it in 331 BC. Remember him? This city was also witness to 3 battles between the Romans and the Persians. It suffered an attack by Genghis Khan in the 13th century and was bludgeoned by cannons in the 18th century. Even just a few decades ago, the ancient city of Erbil was damaged by tanks belonging to Saddam Hussein. This city has been through a lot. And now for number 8. But first, it's shout-out time! I want to say a big thank you to Bama and Yellow Flossy 3 for supporting this channel. Be sure to subscribe if you haven't already for more videos about unbelievable places from history. Crocodilopolis. Crocodilopolis was ancient Egypt's city of the crocodile god. The Greeks literally called it Crocodile City because it was the center of worship for the Egyptian water god Sobek. Sobek was almost like the Egyptian equivalent of Poseidon from Greek mythology, only he was always depicted as a crocodile. The city was likely founded in the Old Kingdom, starting sometime around 2686 BC. When the city was first occupied, it was known to the Egyptians as Shadet. Built on the shores of Lake Karun in the Fayum Oasis, Shadet benefited from fertile lands, plenty of water, and a seemingly abundant supply of crops. The city inhabitants believed their prosperity was because of their dedication to Sobek. This caused the cult to flourish, and at some point they started worshipping a very real crocodile. Egyptian cult worship was something truly spectacular. Shadet was home to the divine crocodile called Petsukos, or the son of Sobek. Petsukos would be dressed in gold and gems and kept in a special pond inside its temple. The divine crocodile was fed by priests whose only job was to keep the beast happy. Whenever the crocodile died, it would be replaced by a new one. The oasis city continued to prosper, and under control of the Greeks in the 4th century BC, it took on the name Crocodilopolis. Much like the city of Erbil, Crocodilopolis never died. It still exists today as the modern city of Fayum, with all traces of the crocodile cult hidden under the shifting sands. If you worshipped an animal as a god, what animal would you choose, and why? Let me know in the comments below. The Svan Blood Revenge Towers. In the Caucasus Mountains of Georgia's northern border, there is a historical region called Svaneti. It's part of the modern province of Ushguli, but its history goes back many thousands of years. The Svan are a group of ethnic Georgians who speak their own language, a language which happens to have no written alphabet. They date back to 1900 BC and have been living the same lifestyle for centuries. Starting around the 8th century AD, the Svan began building fortified tower dwellings called koshki. These things speckle the mountains and can be found scattered in the wilderness. Hundreds of them built on ridges, in the woods, and on isolated hilltops. They serve to protect small family groups from raiders and during times of blood feuds. The most recent koshki were made in the 18th century. Most of them are abandoned, but many are in almost perfect condition and still used today. You might be curious about the blood feuds. There is an ancient feudal system of blood revenge that is still practiced by the Svan today. This ancient custom is fairly simple. If someone insults another person, the person offended by the insult retaliates with murder. They either murder the person who insulted them or a male member of their family. After somebody dies, the family of the murder victim is then able to retaliate against the other family. The blood feud cycle has then begun, and essentially never ends. Even though there are only 30,000 ethnic Svan left in Georgia, blood feuds still permeate their society to this day. Mukawir. The fortress of Mukawir lies in ruins at the top of a hill overlooking the vast and desolate Dead Sea. Its perch is roughly 3,000 feet above sea level. Giving it such an impressive vantage, it's no surprise that it was used as a military outpost. Around 90 BC, King Alexander Genasis of the Hasmoneans ordered a fortress to be built on the strategic hilltop to prevent invasions. But seeing the invasion coming, it didn't do much to save the Hasmoneans. The fortress was destroyed in 57 BC, and this would be the end of days for the Hasmonean dynasty. If you're familiar with the Bible, you'll recognize the Hasmoneans as the ruling party of Judea starting around 140 BC. They were descendants of the Maccabee family, but their rule only lasted about 80 years. The kingdom briefly regained some lost boundaries, only to be decimated and wiped out. The fortress of Mukawir was rebuilt by Herod the Great in 30 BC, 7 years after the defeat of the Hasmoneans. It was inside the rebuilt Mukawir fortress that John the Baptist was imprisoned before he was beheaded. Then came the Romans. In 72 AD, during the full-out Roman assault on the Jews of what would become Israel, the fortress was destroyed. It was obliterated, with nothing left except scraps from its foundations. These foundations were discovered briefly in 1807, but not excavated until 1968. Ethiopia's Camelot, Fasil Gebi. In the Middle Ages, Ethiopian emperors practiced the tradition of traveling around the countryside with all of their belongings. They would live off whatever the peasants gave them and live in small, easily portable tent cities. There would be entire imperial camps where emperors lived. Then, in the 17th century, Emperor Fasilides broke with tradition. Instead of progressing through the territories of Ethiopia as the royal nomad, he built a city. He founded the legendary city of Gondar and made it his capital. In that capital was built what many have called Ethiopia's Camelot, the Fasil Gebi. Hassan ibn Ahmad al-Haymi was a traveler from Yemen who detailed his adventures and the places he saw. He visited the emperor's stone castle in 1648, very soon after its construction. He learned that the architect was an Indian stonemason who went by the name Abd al-Karim. Hassan described the castle as an outstanding wonder, a marvelous house of stone and lime. The emperor truly enjoyed living a stable existence. The emperors who came after did too. In 1696, it was claimed there were 80 royal children running around indiscriminately on the castle grounds. The imperial compound soon birthed a thriving city around it. But nothing lasts forever. The emperors of Ethiopia vanished, and today the castle, while still standing, is a sad shell of its former self. China's lost water city. Archaeologists in China recently excavated the ruins of what's being called an ancient water city. This mysterious city was built an estimated 2,500 years ago in Jiangsu province. The Wuxiabang ruins were uncovered just a few miles from one of the biggest freshwater lakes in the country, Lake Taihu. The city may have once looked like a primitive version of Italy's Venice. Researchers say the corners of the city were connected by waterways. Instead of getting from one place to another using solid roads, the citizens used small boats to paddle through the watery avenues. When they wanted to visit a friend, they got in their boat and paddled up to their front door. The city contained 3 main areas. Archaeologists uncovered an inner city, an outer city, and the outskirts. They say the inner city was protected by tall walls and an impressive moat. This was likely where the elite members of society lived, while the peasant class was out on the outskirts. The outer city was likely home to the working class, people who had enough money to have their own boats and their own small dwellings. Would you like to live in a city built on water? Let me know in the comments. Saparang. Saparang is a ruined city that sits on top of a rock formation deep in the remote wilderness of western Tibet. It was once the capital of the little-known Guj Kingdom, which emerged in the 10th century AD. At the time, there was a major trading route cutting through the vast Tibetan landscape. A group of locals got together and decided to control that trading route. They built themselves a city, then grew bloated from the wealth they extracted from all those trying to move through the region. They were bridge keepers, controlling the flow of traffic in and out of the Garuda Valley. Even today, the ruins of the city are breathtaking. Ruined houses, rough stone walls, destroyed temples, hollow palaces, and Buddhist sanctuaries are all falling to pieces on the rock formation. Saparang was built like a stone honeycomb at the peak of a mountain. There are even mysterious tunnels that were carved by Tibetan Buddhist hermits, winding like the corridors of an ant's nest underneath the forsaken town. Things didn't go too well for the Guj Kingdom. Jesuit missionaries stumbled across the city around 1624. They asked King Tri Tashi Drakpa if they could build a Jesuit church and convert the locals, and the king said yes. This enraged his subjects, who then overthrew him in 1630. The royal family was taken captive, and the kingdom fell into its death spiral. A central Tibetan government then showed up in the late 17th century, and Saparang was conquered. The city fell into obscurity, only to be destroyed by the Chinese Red Guard in the 1960s. The Kanchi Kailasanathar Temple in the Indian state of Tamil Nadu stands a magnificent temple that's supposedly the oldest thing in the city. The Kanchi Kailasanathar Temple was built in the 8th century as a place of worship for Lord Shiva. The name itself translates to Lord of the Cosmic Mountain. The temple is an amazing piece of architecture, but the story behind it is even more fascinating. It was built in Kanchipuram, one of the 7 sacred cities of Hinduism. The city was chosen by the powerful Pallava dynasty to be a sacred metropolis in the 3rd century. The Pallavas soon used Kanchipuram as their capital, while they lorded over a massive chunk of southern India. They ruled Kanchipuram up until the 9th century AD, when the Chalukyas showed up and defeated them. Chola ruler Aditya I brought the hammer down in 897, ending 600 years of dominance. That was longer than the original Roman Empire was around. It's believed Pallava ruler Rajasima Pallaveswaram was the one who commissioned the construction of the temple. He ruled in the first half of the 8th century. The temple is now the only major structure still standing from the days when Kanchipuram was the capital. The megalithic builders. Archaeologists in France recently uncovered a fortified compound from 6,300 years ago. The ancient residential site likely belonged to some of the first megalithic builders in Europe. These may have been the very first human beings in Europe to make massive monuments out of stone. They were Neolithic men and women who handcrafted some of the first dolmens, barrows, and other large stone structures. The team of researchers identified an ancient enclosure in southwestern France called Le Pou as the home of the early builders. The site was discovered during a recent aerial survey, 3 ruined buildings constructed on a hilltop. Archaeologists then got boots on the ground and may have been working on excavations ever since. Now, scientists have finally gotten enough information to reveal the details of the settlement. Dr. Vincent Ard from the French National Center for Scientific Research says the people who lived here put a lot of effort into protecting themselves. Researchers found the remains of palisade walls. The settlement was protected by a thick marsh, and they built strong wooden structures. The villagers even had a defensive ditch and what may have been watchtowers. The settlement was discovered near a prehistoric cemetery with some of the oldest barrow tombs in the world. Forget about Mesopotamia. Small settlements like the Po were where civilization really got started. Thanks for watching! Which of these incredible ancient places do you think was the most impressive when they were at their peak? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Be sure to subscribe if you haven't already and come back soon. Bye!